So, I woke up today with the topic of depression on my spirit. And the reason is because I have a few friends, family members, and even myself who have either gone through it, who are going through it currently, or will possibly go through it. Um, and it's a topic that we got to touch on. I really feel like we got to touch on it. And I do want to put a disclaimer out there. Now, I do understand there are many types of depressions. I know that some depressions are related to mental illness or imbalances, whether it be emotional or chemical, things like that. I get that. And I am not speaking about those sorts of depressions. I know that those are totally different, and I don't have any right to speak on them, so I won't. I'm only going to speak about the depressions that I've experienced or I've been in contact with when it comes to other people. Yeah. So when it comes to depression, I honestly feel like depression is the manifestation of an internal struggle where we know that there's a need for something in our life that needs to change, but we can't make the change. And we may not be able to make the change because we don't have the knowledge, or we do have the knowledge, but we don't have the means to make the change. And let me repeat that. I feel like the thing we call depression is the manifestation of an internal struggle where we have a need to make a change in some area in our life, but for some reason, whether it is a lack of knowledge or a lack of capability, we can't make the change. And so what's the result? We get frustrated. We get frustrated and then we get depressed. And let me give you a few life experiences where I've seen this be the case. So when I was younger, I remember growing up with my four siblings. Both my parents were married until my father passed away at 12. He passed away from cancer. Now, when I was growing up, I remember, all the typical issues in a normal household and in a normal black household. I do remember that we were poor. I remember the arguments and the fights and the laughs and the cries. Like, I remember it all. And I remember my father being the disciplinarian, but he was also the only parent that was the affectionate parent. My mother is not an affectionate person, so it was always my father who was affectionate. And also, in addition to that, my mother and I have a strained relationship. And so we've never been close, and I've always been treated by her as if she's hated me. And so, with all of that being said, I still felt happy growing up. I remember having love when it came to my father, so that was enough for me. He was my best friend. I tell people that all the time that he was my first love. When it comes to the man that I'm going to look into marrying, just like a woman would say, my father was my first love. He is the standard for who I will marry. And I remember being so happy, and then I remember being 12 and he passed from cancer. And the death, the cancer, that wasn't what sent me into my depression at the time. It was the following sort of activity in the household after. As I mentioned, my mother was not affectionate, and she also had ill feelings towards me. So I remember coming home to turmoil and, different forms of abuse. And I remember the fights in the household at the time. The only ones in the household were all of us, minus one of my oldest siblings. She moved out, but the rest of us were always fighting and arguing, and it was just terrible. And I knew I hated it there at the time, but if I had to put it into words, I remember just feeling like I hated my lot in life. And what was worse, I felt like my lot in life would never change. I felt like what I had was as good as it was going to get, and that there was no rescue. And I felt like I had no love. My oldest sister is like a mother to me even to this day, but I didn't want to be a burden because she was married and she had her own life, and I didn't want to be a burden, and I tried to distance myself as much as I could so as to not be a burden. So I remember feeling like, okay, I don't have my father anymore. My sister is the only one that I feel like loves me. My younger sister, she's my little sister at the time. I was a child, so, there wasn't much support I could grab from her. And then my brother and I, we were going at it. And then my second older sister, we were going at it. And then my mother and I. So I honestly remember feeling 12 without anyone in the world that loved me besides my oldest sister. who had her own life to live. And so I was depressed. I remember being depressed until I was a little bit older and understood things differently and I coped with things differently. But I remember being depressed because I knew that there was a need for change in my life and I couldn't make the change. Not only did I not have the knowledge of how to change, being 12, I didn't have the means to change my lot in life at the time. And so I was depressed. Now let's fast forward 13 years. So I'm 25 at the time, and I remember losing my job. And I, at that time, had been working for almost 10 years, and I have never in my life, to this day, have been so much as written up at a job. So to have lost my job at that time was devastating, to say the least. And I remember not being necessarily depressed because of losing my job, but it was just the circumstances surrounding losing my job. I was confused as to why I lost my job. It was something that was unfair, but something I've moved past. But to this day, it's still not a valid thing that happened. But we move on. Now, with that being said, I remember it happened, and I was so confused as to why, how, what the fuck is going on of it all, really, if I'm being honest. And so, because I was going through that sort of confusion, I wasn't focused on what was happening in front of me. I was 25 without a job. The bills didn't stop coming in. My car note didn't stop coming in. My insurances didn't stop coming in. My rent didn't stop coming in. My utilities. I remember not even being concerned with those things. I was so caught up in why I was fired from my job that I wasn't even focused on the fact that I needed another job. So there I was again with a need, but this time I did have the means, but I didn't have the knowledge. Or honestly, I didn't even have the means at the time. I was so incapacitated and paralyzed due to my confusion of what happened that I didn't even realize I had the means or the knowledge to change things. I just let my life crumble around me. And I remember being depressed. And that depression lasted for several months. And it's so funny. I have some new friends in my life, and you probably would never look at me and see that that is something I recently experienced because I have moved past it. But that was one of the darkest times of my life. I'm not a crier when it comes to myself. Now, I'll cry for other people. I empathize with other people. But I remember as a child crying often because of that. I remember crying and getting these headaches out of the frustration of not being able to change my lot in life. And I have not cried like that until those 13 years later at 25, where I sat at the bottom of my shower months after the incident, and I cried. I cried it out because I was so frustrated. I didn't understand, like, yo, Malik, you know that you got bills. You know that you got to get up. You know you got to make shit happen. And I don't understand why I'm not motivated to do so. And I started to isolate myself, and I started to just hang out in the house all day until nightfall, and I wouldn't come out. I developed body image issues. I didn't want to be seen until after nightfall. I've always been a thicker boy, and I love it. I love every bit of my body. And that's always been how I have been. But at 25, I hated my body. Hated it. Didn't recognize it. Didn't like the way I looked in clothes, how I felt in clothes, how I looked in the mirror. How just sitting there existing, I hated it all. And I realized I was depressed. It wasn't until I cried that I realized I was depressed. Because I was eating still. I thought I was still doing family activities and realized that I wasn't. But, you think, people say, oh, you don't eat when you're depressed. And, you may overdrink and think that I wasn't doing any of those things. I was still, doing things normally, or so I thought, until I realized I was really, really going through something. And I've since moved past that. I addressed the need. I got a new job, and here I am today. And so I share those experiences with you all because in my experience, depression can often be linked to having a need for a change in your life. And for some reason, not knowing how to make the change or not having the means to make the change. And so you get frustrated and you get depressed. But here's what I want to leave with everyone. That's not okay. It is common to be depressed, but it is not normal to stay there. And as black people especially, I want to speak to us black people, my black people. We don't live in our parents. We don't not. We do not live in our parents' day and age where depression was your fate. You're depressed, so you're mentally ill, you slow, you this, you that. And if you talk to a therapist, you're weak, something's wrong with you. That was bullshit then, and it's hella bullshit now. There is nothing fucking wrong with having a mental illness, some sort of imbalance, or simply be just going through shit and you need to talk to someone. That person can be a therapist, it can be a counselor, it can be a mentor, it can be a friend, it can be a family member, but you gotta talk to somebody. Because what's not normal, while it's common to have issues, what's not normal is thinking it's okay to just live with them. That's where it's not normal. And if you're someone like me, where I thought I was isolating myself because I didn't want to bring anyone down, I was going through a lot, I'm sparing them my feelings, that's a bunch of bullshit. If you think you are sparing your family and your friends hurt by distancing yourself, you are misleading yourself. You're hurting them by hurting you. Think about that. My stomach don't gotta be making those noises. I'm sorry. I'm hungry. And I've been dieting. But my thing is, you thinking that by distancing yourself is helping people, it isn't. Those people love you. So you removing yourself from their presence hurts them. Normally dealing with them, but then when something comes up, you don't deal with them anymore. That hurts them. That's offensive, and it's not fair to submit them to that. Or to subject them to that, To make them be under the terms of your depression and to be at your, sort of whim when it comes to your emotional state. That's not okay. It's not fair to expect that of anybody. And to be honest, we're entering a new decade. And it's like, if you've been dealing with this and you haven't been making the change, now is the time to make the change. Why not start now? Not just because it's the new decade, but why not start now? Why not make that a part of your New Year's resolutions that people make and never stick to? Why not make this the one you do stick to? Now, it's not easy. It's work. You're going to have to sit down. You have to ask yourself, why? Why am I upset? For me, I sat down and I said, why am I so confused about being fired? It happens to people. And I found out that I thought I was confused because it just never happened to me and I don't understand. No, I was confused because I had a very lucrative job and I was drinking the Kool-Aid, as if you will, that this is such a good job and you were going to be set for life and this, that, and the third, that I was devastated by losing the job. So I had to identify what was causing the, upset within me so that I can attack the issue. You can't identify or attack something you don't recognize or know what it is. So if you wake up every day and you're upset all the time, or every other day, or so often you're just always depressed, ask yourself why. Are you upset about your lot in life at home? Are you upset about where you work? Are you upset about where you think you should be at this age or at this point in your life, or in comparison to your siblings or to, anybody, your friends? Or maybe you're in a relationship you're not happy about. Maybe you want to be in a relationship. Ask yourself why. Why am I mad that I'm not in a relationship? Should I be mad? There's a lot of people that's not in a relationship. What about me can I change to remove this depression? And so that's what I implore all of you, if you're listening. Reach out to someone, please. It's not easy. It's going to be work. But what other work could be more important than the work that involves bettering you? Your mental health, your mental peace, your peace of mind is the most important thing that you can have. Because at the end of the day, whether you're ever going to be in a relationship, whether you're ever going to get married, whether you're ever going to have that dream job, or if something happens to you and you lose your job, something else that's adverse happens to you, at the end of all those things, the only thing you have left is the good Lord and yourself, your peace of mind. Yes, you have friends, you have family, but those people come and go. Those people can pass away. They can move away. Things happen.